Summer 2026, the opening night of the World Cup. While the whole world outside is going wild with glory, deep within this tunnel, the most cruel and unjust discrimination is being perpetrated. They want to break the legs of a genius before he even has a chance to shine.
The coach already said it, listen to your captain, kid. Just running fast isn't enough to be a star at the World Cup. Here, you need a European mindset, African instinct.
The mind of a genius, or merely a cruel excuse to keep outcasts like Marcus forever in the shadows? They want to exhaust his physical strength, force him to run like a machine, but strip him of the right to recognition. But the one at the top doesn't know that the long-dormant volcano has begun to crack.
What kind of mindset do you have, Thomas? Walking around for 75 minutes, making countless misplaced passes and dragging the whole team into the mud? You wear the captain's armband because of your skin color, not because of that pathetic ability.
Don't use that cheap title of architect to cover up your incompetence on the field.
The coach approached Marcus, raised his voice, and said,
"Shut up, Marcus! You're just a cheap immigrant given a chance to stand here. You're just a hired runner, understand? If we lose this game, your indiscipline will bear the brunt of the national media's criticism."
Look closely at your faces. I'm going onto the field. I'm gonna run. I'm gonna fight, but not for your rotten system or your charity. I'm gonna turn this stadium into my own stage. And remember this day. The day you despise me, I will begin to crush your arrogance under my heels.
The 78th minute. The tunnel doors opened. A chorus of hateful whistles roared from the stands, as if trying to suffocate the 22-year-old. But the moment Marcus's boots touched the MetLife turf, a new era officially began. The most brutal purge in football history, where an outcast rose to overthrow an entire elite empire. The summer of 2026 was unlike any other. MetLife Stadium in New York roared like a volcano on the verge of eruption. 80,000 fans shook the stands with screams and chants, while millions of camera flashes shimmered like a blinding ocean of light. The greatest football tournament on earth had officially begun, and the world was watching. People wept for glory, roared for national pride, and claimed football was a universal religion, a game where the spherical ball knew no color, no borders, no prejudice. But Marcus Diop knew better. Deep inside the stadium, far from the bright glare of television cameras, Marcus was kneeling in the cold concrete tunnel. Sweat dripped down his temple and soaked the back of his shirt. But it was not the heat that weighed him down. It was the invisible pressure that had followed him for as long as he could remember. The whispers of teammates, the condescension of coaches, the biased gaze of the media, and the venomous judgment of a world that refused to see him as more than his skin color, 22 years old. Jersey number 17. A chiseled frame carved from dark ebony, eyes holding a storm so violent it could swallow lesser men. He jumped in place, ankles tight, fists clenched, until his knuckles cracked, listening to the muffled laughter of the golden-haired superstars playing their part in the ritual of visibility. Posing for cameras, joking with referees, adjusting perfectly gelled hair. Marcus was invisible, yet painfully present. They passed him without a glance. Their whispers of mockery floated in the tunnel like poison gas. Hired sprinter, can't think tactically, just run. Marcus heard it all. He did not retaliate. He only felt the familiar heat of rage boiling in his chest, the same fire that had accompanied him since the academy. Since the first time someone judged him not by skill, but by color. To earn a place in this World Cup tunnel, Marcus's journey had never been paved with roses. Each step was marked with frustration, tears shed in silent corridors, endless repetition on training pitches, and the heavy weight of doubt from those who should have believed in him. From his teenage years, Marcus had possessed a weapon no defender wanted to face. Explosive speed rivaling a cheetah, dribbling skills that skirted the edges of physics, the uncanny ability to dismantle entire defensive lines with one mind-blowing run. Yet, to the academy coaches, conservative managers, and local media, it was never enough. When a white player lost the ball, it was called An unfortunate tactical mishap. When Marcus lost possession, headlines screamed the wild instincts and lack of discipline of African-born players. Every loss, every stumble, every moment of misfortune was magnified into proof of his alleged shortcomings. Marcus's memory flickered to the locker rooms of his youth. Always in the furthest corner, near the exit, the designated place for third-string substitutes. The coaching staff needed his raw power in the final minutes of a match, his stamina to wear down defenders, but they stripped him of leadership, of recognition, of the right to influence the game. Thomas Bauer, golden-haired and smooth-talking, got the #1 spot, the captain's armband, media privileges, accolades for vision and intelligence. Even when his recent form was mediocre at best, Marcus had once stood up in a pre-tournament friendly, demanding to start. The head coach had looked at him with that chilling, patronizing smirk, Bauer's hand landing condescendingly on his shoulder. "Know your place," they said. "Sit quietly. Learn to think like a European." He had learned the tunnel seemed endless that day, shadowed corridor between the roar of fans and the bright lights that would soon blind the world. Every sound reverberated, the echo of distant chants, the thud of boots on concrete, the rhythmic clap of a teammate testing the ball before kickoff. Marcus could feel the vibrations of the stadium in his chest, each pulse a reminder of what awaited him outside. Hundreds of thousands of eyes, billions of expectations, millions of preconceived judgments. And yet, he was calm. Not the calm of surrender, but the calm of a predator waiting to strike. He ran scenarios in his head. Every defender, every pressing pattern, every potential mistake. For years, he had internalized the game like a chess master studying a board, anticipating moves, visualizing possibilities that others could not even imagine. His mind drifted to the small village in Dakar, where he first kicked a ball. The sun had scorched the clay fields, the dust rising in clouds as barefoot boys ran after the ball with makeshift goals. Marcus had been different even then, faster, sharper, more unpredictable. Coaches warned that his style was chaotic, but Marcus never cared. Every successful dribble, every goal, every sprint was a moment of pure exhilaration, a private triumph that belonged only to him. He remembered the early days at the National Academy. Long hours, drills designed to break him, lectures laced with subtle disdain. He watched as white teammates were praised for minor tactical compliance, while his brilliance was reduced to a fluke, a raw instinct to be tamed. The media echoed the prejudice, the subtle and not-so-subtle messages that his place was always at the margins. Every training session was a crucible, every match a test not just of skill, but of resilience against a world that never wanted to see him succeed. Marcus clenched his fists. The memory was sharp, painful, but it fueled him. Every insult, every slight, every dismissive glance was fuel for the fire burning in his chest. Cut to the opening match of World Cup 2026. Mexico awaited a disciplined, intelligent, unforgiving team. The scoreboard read 1-0 against Marcus's team past the 75th minute. Thomas Bauer, the Golden Prince, floundered on the pitch, misplaced passes, hands on hips, gasping for breath, barking at teammates in frustration. The aristocratic style imposed by the coaching staff was suffocating under Mexico's relentless high press. The stadium was an earthquake of sound. Mexican fans screamed, chanted, and stamped their feet in unison. Panic rippled through the coaching staff. And then, like a storm's eye forming, the assistant coach ran toward Marcus, yelling above the chaos. "Marcus, warm up! Get in there!" He shot up like a coiled spring, ripping off his substitute bib, every muscle tense, every nerve alive. But as he stepped toward the touchline, Bauer trudged off, refusing a high five, refusing even to glance at him. He slammed his water bottle onto the turf, venting his frustration in an act of petty ownership of the moment. And then, the stadium speakers bellowed his name, Marcus Diop. The reaction was instantaneous. A section of ultras erupted with boos and whistles. Then something even darker, the monkey chants. Dense, agonizing, poisonous, echoing through the cavernous stadium. The referee and coaching staff could see it, but pretended not to. Marcus froze for a heartbeat. His chest tightened with a searing rage. Then he knelt, touching the World Cup grass, inhaling the cold New York air, letting it fill every lung, every fiber of his being. When he raised his head, there was no fear, no submission, only the gaze of an apex predator locking onto its prey. "Look closely," he whispered to himself. "This is not where you humiliate me. This is my stage." And with that, Marcus Diop stepped onto the pitch, carrying every slight, every insult, every injustice in the fire burning in his chest. The roar of the stadium crashed against Marcus like a physical wave. He could feel it in his chest, in his legs, in every heartbeat that thrummed like a war drum. The MetLife turf beneath him felt alive, quivering under the feet of thousands, every blade of grass vibrating in resonance with the deafening cheers, or jeers, of the crowd. The first touch of the ball was critical. A careless pass from a teammate, one who had never truly believed in him, tumbled toward Marcus, arriving behind his back with deliberate inaccuracy. He didn't flinch. With a motion so fluid it seemed preordained, he trapped the ball against his chest and spun in one perfect arc. The defender lunged, timing the challenge with aggression born of confidence, but Marcus was already elsewhere, gliding past with uncanny precision. Gasp rippled across the stadium. Thousands of mouths open, eyes wide, hearts stopping, as the young outcast took control of the game in a single, breathtaking movement. Marcus ran like the wind incarnate, his muscles firing in perfect synchrony, every stride powered by years of frustration, years of being overlooked, ignored, and underestimated. He didn't need to think. Instinct had taken over. Each defender who attempted to close him down became a blur. His touches were precise, calculated, yet utterly free, a beautiful chaos only he could command. The Mexican right flank was disintegrating before the crowd's eyes. Marcus darted, weaved, and pivoted, leaving opponents staggering in his wake. His pace was terrifying, not just a measure of speed, but an aura, a force that seemed to bend the defender's will. The stadium was suspended in disbelief. Fans, reporters, broadcasters, and even the opposing coaches could not tear their eyes away. This was no ordinary player. They were witnessing something extraordinary, something that transcended tactical manuals and team sheets. Phantom thoughts of every slight, every whispered insult, every media headline burned behind his eyes. Each step, each feint, each pass was an unspoken retort. He wasn't here to please anyone. He was here to exist, to conquer, to prove a truth they all denied, that he belonged, not because they allowed it, but because he had earned it. Minutes passed like seconds. Marcus darted into space just beyond the midfield, three defenders converging in a tight triangle. Any normal player would have panicked. Marcus smiled, a faint, feral curve of his lips. 3 step-overs, each more hypnotic than the last, and he sliced through the trap effortlessly. The ball clung to his boot like it had a mind of its own. He accelerated, leaving the first man in his wake, the second clutching at thin air, the third stumbling, chasing shadows. The crowd exploded. A section of American supporters, unsure who to cheer for, found themselves roaring with awe, standing in unison to celebrate a brilliance they had not anticipated. Marcus knew the world was watching, not just the cameras, but the tiny, unseen eyes of every doubter, every racist troll, every person who had called him a hired sprinter. He drew back, surveying the penalty box with surgical precision. Thomas Bauer, who had done little but wander and frown the entire half, was in position. Marcus' cross was not just a ball, it was a statement. He whipped it across the pitch, perfectly weighted, razor-sharp, threading a needle through the defenders. Bauer connected, almost stunned, and the ball rolled into the net. 1-1, Marcus did not celebrate. He stopped, chest heaving, eyes scanning the stands. He could feel the tension crackling around him, the disbelief, the sudden recognition of something they had all overlooked. 50 yards had been run by Marcus to deliver this moment. 2 meters had been tapped in by Bauer. And yet, the world would applaud the latter. The stadium erupted in mixed chaos. Fans screamed, cried, clutched their heads, cheered and groaned all at once. Marcus, grounded in the moment, felt every vibration, every heartbeat of the arena, every wave of sound hitting his ears and reverberating through his chest. It was intoxicating. It was justice. It was pure, unfiltered validation. But the game was far from over. Mexico pressed, sensing the shift in momentum. Marcus was relentless. He darted into space, a phantom streak of black against the green pitch. Each pass he made was precise, teasing, impossible to intercept. Each defender who tried to contain him faltered, every move a lesson in futility. Marcus's feet moved with the fluidity of a dancer, the ruthlessness of a predator. By the 84th minute, Marcus had single-handedly turned the tide. A sliding tackle, a burst of acceleration, a perfect pass threaded through a narrow opening, and suddenly his team had been given life again. Even teammates who had ignored him in the locker room began to notice. Eyes widened, breaths caught. For the first time, Marcus was no longer invisible. He had imposed himself on the game, demanded recognition with every inch of muscle and fiber. And yet, Marcus remained silent, letting his play speak volumes. He could hear the sneers, the silent calculations of journalists noting Bauer's heroic tap-in, but he did not allow it to diminish him. Every ball he controlled, every space he opened, every defender left behind was a sentence written in his personal manifesto. I belong here. You cannot erase me. The final minutes approached, and the pressure became unbearable. Mexico's defenders intensified, crowd noise soared, and the stadium seemed to pulse with collective anticipation. Marcus moved like a conductor, orchestrating the chaos, weaving through traps and closing options, turning pressure into opportunity. His legs burned, lungs screamed, but he was untouchable, emotionally, mentally, physically. He was a hurricane incarnate, a force that would not be denied. The whistle blew for full time, but Marcus's impact had already been carved into the game. The scoreboard read 1-1, but the narrative had shifted. He had rewritten the rules of the match with his speed, vision, and unyielding will. And though the headlines would focus on Bauer, Marcus knew what had been accomplished. He had forced recognition through excellence, through performance, through pure, unassailable talent. The flight from New York to Vancouver had been quiet, almost unnervingly so. Outside, the clouds pressed against the fuselage like a gray, suffocating blanket. Rain streaked the windows in endless sheets, tapping in hypnotic patterns as if the sky itself were mourning the journey that lay ahead. Inside the cabin, Marcus sat alone, slouched in his seat, headphones off, staring blankly at the storm-lashed horizon. Every drop of rain mirrored the countless tears he had swallowed over the years. Tears shed for injustice, for isolation, for moments where talent and effort seemed irrelevant in the face of bias. The team hotel mirrored the grim, relentless rain outside. Slick marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights overhead, and the corridors echoed with the hollow footsteps of teammates who treated their environment like a stage for camaraderie, while Marcus was the unwanted audience. He carried his tray through the dining hall, the clatter of cutlery echoing ominously. As he approached a long table, his gaze fell on Thomas Bauer and the inner circle of the so-called elite squad. In perfect synchrony, they rose, trays in hand, moving to another table, leaving Marcus in a vacuum of silence. The weight of contempt pressed on him, yet he sat, unflinching, letting the storm gather within him. He had faced prejudice before, sure, but this, it was the consolidation of years, decades almost, of being judged not for skill or passion, but for skin. The whispers in locker rooms, the subtle glances of disapproval, the headlines in every local newspaper, all of it had piled on him like bricks. Yet in this crucible he found clarity. Pain had always been a catalyst, and Marcus had learned to transform it into fuel. The next match was more than just another fixture. It was a crucible of judgment, a battlefield against both an opponent and the suffocating weight of expectation. Their adversary was a South American powerhouse, the kind of team that played football like a physical religion, relentless, cunning, ruthless. The rain pounded the pitch, turning it into a canvas of water and mud. Every sprint sent sprays of liquid into the air. Every tackle was a collision amplified by the storm. Head coach Lefebvre, blinded by a mixture of arrogance and prejudice, refused to alter the starting lineup. Marcus remained on the bench, a silent observer of the collapse that had been building from kickoff. The midfield was inert, the forwards predictable, Bauer floundering and misplacing passes under mounting pressure. The pundits had warned Lefebvre. The style was too rigid, too predictable, too pedestrian. But the coach's obsession with his purebred selection blinded him to reality. He would rather fail with privilege than trust the boy he had ignored for years. From the first whistle, the South Americans dominated. The ball zipped from wing to wing, the midfield snapped under pressure, and the defense strained to cover gaps that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Every misstep of Bauer, every hesitant pass, became an opportunity for the opponent. By the 60th minute, the scoreboard told a brutal story, 2-0. The fans groaned, shouted, and booed. Panic festered across the bench. Then, Lefebvre had no choice. He called Marcus to the field, but it was no cinematic entrance. The match was already a disaster. The midfield had ceased fighting, the forwards were isolated, and the stadium's energy had shifted toward inevitable defeat. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled off his warm-up bib, muscles taut, rain plastering his shirt to his skin, eyes alight with intensity. As he jogged toward the pitch, the world seemed to slow. Defenders' positions, passing lanes, the trajectory of the ball, all became clear in an instant. He entered the match like a storm breaking through a fragile dam. 6 defenders converged, expecting an easy neutralization. Marcus exploded past them, sidestepping, feinting, pivoting with precision that made the chaos around him irrelevant. Each step was a calculated statement. He was present, he was here, he would not be ignored. The first minutes were brutal. The rain made footing treacherous, the ball slippery, every pass unpredictable. Marcus adapted instantly, sliding through mud and puddles, turning potential mistakes into moments of brilliance. He intercepted passes, launched counterattacks, and created space where there was none. Even teammates who had ignored him before began to notice. Their eyes widened in disbelief, a mixture of awe and shame. Marcus's mind raced alongside his legs. He remembered every insult, every dismissal from the media, every whisper of doubt in locker rooms. The chatter in social media, the banana emojis, the racial slurs, all of it flared in his memory, not as a weakness, but as fuel. Each movement, each step, each sprint was a manifesto. I am here. I exist. You cannot erase me. He picked up the ball at midfield, the opposing team converging like a pack of wolves. One defender, then another, then a third, closing the net. Marcus danced through them with a series of step-overs and feints so precise it looked choreographed. The ball was an extension of his body, glued to his boot. He accelerated past the first, left the second sprawling, and spun past the third, leaving him grasping at empty air. The stadium erupted into astonishment, some fans rising to their feet, some commentators whispering disbelief, all witnessing what seemed impossible. Marcus didn't stop. He drove the ball forward, scanning the box for options, pulling defenders away, creating chaos that only he could exploit. The passes he threaded were perfectly weighted, slicing through tight formations, and suddenly the forwards had new openings. Marcus's team, previously paralyzed, began moving in response, tentative at first, then with more confidence. The young outcast had become the epicenter of their offense, dictating movement, tempo, and pressure. Every contact with the ball, every sprint down the flanks, every sudden change in direction sent shockwaves through the opponent. The South American defenders, so accustomed to predictable patterns, struggled to adapt to Marcus's improvisation, his fluidity, his raw genius. He moved like water, flowing into gaps, spinning around tackles, and turning defensive pressure into attacking opportunities. By the 78th minute, Marcus had become a one-man revolution. A perfectly timed interception at midfield led to a blistering solo run. Past two defenders sliding desperately to block him, one misjudging the pivot, another overcommitting to a tackle. He burst into the final third, eyes scanning for the finishing touch. A subtle glance to the forwards, a millisecond of calculation, and a perfectly weighted pass threaded between defenders into the path of a teammate. The stadium roared as Marcus sprinted on, relentless, unstoppable. He felt every heartbeat, every drop of rain, every gasp from the crowd. He wasn't just playing a match, he was asserting his existence, proving a lifetime of overlooked talent and hard-earned resilience. Even when Bauer finally touched the ball in the penalty box to score, Marcus did not flinch or seek recognition. His work had created the moment. He understood that victories were often claimed by the one who finished, not the one who built it. But the narrative in his mind was clear. He had forced the world to pay attention. The final whistle blew. The scoreboard read 2-0. The team had been humiliated. Yet, Marcus's internal triumph was unassailable. Though the media spun stories of collapse and the trolls directed their hatred toward him, Marcus stood in the rain, drenched, exhausted, eyes blazing. He had survived the storm. He had fought alone, under impossible conditions, against both opponents and prejudice. That night, overlooking the Vancouver Bay from the hotel balcony, Marcus pressed his hands against the cold metal railing. Rain soaked him to the bone, wind whipping his hair, yet his gaze was unflinching. He whispered promises to himself, words that would become his mantra in the coming matches. I will not cry. I will not quit. I will force the world to remember my name. Not for pity, not for applause, only for the truth of my existence and the strength I carry within. The storm outside mirrored the one inside him. A tempest ready to unleash fury on Azteca Stadium, the cathedral of football. Marcus had been pushed to the edge, tested by humiliation, abandonment, and betrayal. He would not break. Not now, not ever. Azteca Stadium was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, even in his wildest dreams. The colossal structure seemed to pulse with life, a living entity built to host the pinnacle of footballing drama. Flags snapped violently in the wind, the collective roar of 100,000 spectators vibrating through the metal and concrete like a low-frequency tremor. The sun bore down relentlessly, a golden glare reflecting off the wet, freshly watered turf, making the grass shimmer and sparkle under the intense Mexican heat. Every heartbeat in the stadium, from fans, players, and even the coaching staff, felt magnified, a force that pressed upon every nerve in Marcus's body. Marcus Diop, number 17, stepped onto the Azteca grass with a calm so intense it seemed unnatural. The stadium's roar crashed against him like a wave, rattling bones and sending shivers down his spine. The tension was suffocating, yet Marcus embraced it. He could feel the gaze of every spectator, the anxious scrutiny of Lefebvre, the defensive calculations of the South American team, and the invisible shadow of Thomas Bauer's absence, all of it coalescing into a singular, fiery focus. Lefebvre had approached him earlier, voice trembling, eyes darting to avoid Marcus's gaze. "Marcus, you're starting. Just do what you can." No encouragement, no warm reassurance, just the weight of responsibility. Marcus ignored the words. He didn't need validation. He carried the confidence forged through years of dismissal, ridicule, and systemic doubt. The number 17 jersey was more than a piece of cloth. It was armor, a symbol of survival, a proclamation of dominance yet to be proven. He walked past Lefebvre, past the tense assistant coaches, past the anxious substitutes, and onto the pitch, as if the stadium itself had cleared a path for him. The whistle blew. Marcus exploded into motion. The first touch of the ball was electric, an extension of the fire burning in his chest. A long pass from midfield slid toward him over the slick turf. A South American defender lunged aggressively, confident in the assumption that the young African-born substitute would falter. Marcus trapped the ball with his chest, spun in a fluid arc, and accelerated. His movements were poetry, precise, fluid, unstoppable. He darted past the first defender, who slid desperately, his feet losing purchase on the rain-slicked surface. He feinted left, spun right, leaving the second defender off balance, grasping at air. By the time the third lunged, Marcus had already accelerated into space, leaving them struggling to read a play that had already passed them by. The crowd erupted into a mix of awe, disbelief, and rising excitement. Gasps, shouts, and camera shutters melded into a deafening chorus. Commentators fumbled for words. Unbelievable! Incredible! Marcus Diop, rewriting the rules of the game. Marcus felt none of this. His mind and body were in perfect harmony. Every movement was instinctual, every sprint premeditated yet spontaneous. He did not play for praise. He played to survive, to assert, to dominate. The first 10 minutes set the tone. Marcus intercepted a pass at midfield and immediately turned it into a counterattack, slicing through defenders who had expected predictable patterns. He scanned the pitch, predicting spaces, noticing subtle shifts in positioning, anticipating the runs of his teammates. Every feint, every dribble, every acceleration was a lesson in timing, precision, and raw genius. He was not just moving the ball. He was orchestrating the tempo, dictating the game, creating openings where none had existed. Teammates who had dismissed him, mocked him, ignored him in the hotel, now responded instinctively to his movements. They followed the channels he opened, timed their runs to his acceleration, and reacted to his decisions as if he were conducting an orchestra. Marcus's presence transformed the previously paralyzed squad into a living, breathing unit, moving as one under his vision. By the 20th minute, Marcus was already shaping the match. A quick sequence of touches, one feint to the left, a spin past a sliding tackle, a perfectly weighted pass splitting the defense, sent a forward through on goal. The keeper rushed, but the ball slipped past the post, grazing the woodwork. Marcus didn't celebrate. He scanned the pitch again, eyes calculating, movements deliberate. The storm had only begun. At the 25th minute, Marcus received the ball at the center circle. 3 defenders converged on him like a pack of wolves. He danced through them with 3 step-overs, feints, and spins that seemed choreographed yet entirely instinctual. The ball clung to his boot, responding to every shift of weight, every adjustment of balance. The first defender lunged too early, sliding into mud. The second misjudged his pivot and fell. The third's feet tangled, and Marcus was through, bursting into the open space of the attacking third. He saw the penalty box, the positioning of forwards, the goalkeeper's stance. A subtle glance, a split-second calculation, and he delivered a cross with millimeter precision. A teammate connected, tapping the ball into the net. Wanda Marcus did not raise his arms. He jogged back, chest heaving, eyes scanning every movement, every defender, every teammate. He was orchestrating, controlling, dictating. Every pass he had made dictated the tempo. Every sprint had forced the opponent to react. Marcus was no longer a substitute. He was the hurricane, reshaping the game itself. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of awe, disbelief, and rising euphoria. Fans began chanting his name. Journalists shouted into microphones, and even the opponents felt the shift. Marcus's influence was absolute. Every dribble, every pivot, every movement created chaos for the South Americans, an opportunity for his team. The match wore on, rain beginning to drizzle lightly, adding a slippery, unpredictable element. Marcus adapted instinctively. Slippery ball, controlled with grace. Sliding tackles, sidestepped with ease. He accelerated past defenders, leaving them sprawled, grasping at nothing. Every attempt to stop him failed. Every movement became a statement. He was not just a player. He was the axis around which this game now revolved. By the 35th minute, Marcus had become the centerpiece of a transformed team. A perfect interception at midfield led to a blistering solo run. 2 sliding tackles failed to stop him. He burst into the attacking third, weaving through a frantic defense and lobbed the ball to the top of the box. A forward met it perfectly and scored, doubling the lead. The stadium erupted into ecstatic cheers. Marcus jogged back, uncelebrated yet utterly dominant, eyes still scanning, still orchestrating. The second half was no less spectacular. Marcus tracked back for defensive duties, contested aerial duels with unrelenting ferocity, and launched counters with surgical precision. The South American defenders, trained to anticipate, could only react, constantly adjusting to the unpredictability, speed, and sheer brilliance of Marcus. Each time they tried to trap him, he anticipated, pivoted, and escaped. The stadium became a stage for his performance. Every corner, every pass, every sprint, a spectacle of resilience and genius. The forwards who had barely touched the ball before now moved as if synchronized to Marcus's rhythm. They read his feints, his runs, and instinctively positioned themselves. The midfielders began connecting passes in chains, faster and more intelligent than before. Marcus had transformed not just the game, but the team itself. By the 70th minute, his influence was complete. He had scored, assisted, intercepted, and dictated play across every inch of the field. The stadium was alive with awe and disbelief. Commentators shouting into microphones, struggling to find words to describe his mastery. Marcus ran past exhausted defenders, weaving through the chaos, orchestrating space for teammates, creating scoring opportunities, and controlling the tempo with an authority that left everyone stunned. By the final whistle, the scoreboard read 3-0. Marcus had dominated every aspect of the match. Teammates lifted their eyes to him, some in admiration, others in guilt for underestimating him. The crowd chanted his name in unison. Even the press, who had often dismissed or criticized him, scrambled to capture the story of this extraordinary solo performance. Marcus walked off the field, rain-soaked, muscles burning, lungs heaving, but his eyes were calm. Every insult, every slight, every prejudice he had faced over the years had been transformed into this perfect performance. He had rewritten the narrative, forced recognition through brilliance, and set the stage for the knockout rounds that would soon follow. He was no longer a substitute, no longer a scapegoat. Marcus Diop had arrived. The hurricane had been unleashed. The round of 16 was billed as a routine match, a bridge between group stage redemption and the looming terror of true World Cup pressure. Yet for Marcus Diop, nothing was routine. The team that had barely survived the group stage, battered and fractured, now faced a tactical powerhouse from Europe. Their opponents moved with precision, fluidity, and confidence. They were disciplined, anticipating the predictable. They did not know that the storm had arrived in the form of number 17. Marcus warmed up on the sideline, rain lightly misting the pitch, his lungs already burning from repeated sprints. The stadium air was thick with tension. The crowd sensed something had changed. Even teammates who had once ignored him now stole glances, recognizing the aura of inevitability surrounding Marcus. The whistle blew, and he exploded into the pitch like a coiled spring, every muscle poised, every nerve alive. The first minutes were a cacophony of chaos and calculation. Marcus immediately read the opposition's structure, exploiting the faintest gap, slicing through midfield with surgical precision. His dribbles were hypnotic, 3, 4, 5 touches, each one more mesmerizing than the last. Defenders lunged and slid, only to find themselves leaving trails of mud and air as Marcus accelerated past them. The ball a living extension of his will. By the 12th minute, Marcus had already forced a turnover deep in his own half. The ball rolled to him like a challenge, and he met it with an explosive burst of speed that seemed to defy gravity. Each step was a calculated surge, muscles coiled and releasing with precision honed through years of relentless training. One defender lunged, sliding desperately across the wet, glistening turf, but Marcus anticipated, shifted his weight subtly, and feinted to the left. With a sharp twist, he spun 180 degrees, leaving the sliding defender sprawled in mud, and the two trailing defenders collided awkwardly, each frustrated at being outmaneuvered by a blur of motion they could barely comprehend. The stadium erupted in a crescendo of gasps and cheers. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every angle, every footfall, every imperceptible flick of Marcus's boot. Commentators' voices rose in frantic disbelief. Unbelievable. He's tearing the defense apart. Incredible vision, incredible pace. Marcus, however, was unbothered by the chaos around him. His gaze swept the field, scanning for movement, analyzing spaces, and calculating options with the fluid precision of a master tactician. He saw the opening, threaded a pass with surgical accuracy toward the forward line, and executed a setup so perfect that the striker barely had to touch it before it found the back of the net. The stadium roared again, tidal wave of awe and excitement that seemed to pulse with the very heartbeat of the city. What followed was a series of movements so fluid and interconnected that it became impossible for the opposition to predict or counter. Marcus's touches dictated the rhythm of the game. He accelerated into channels no one else had noticed, dragging defenders out of position and creating space for teammates to exploit. Every feint, step over, and sudden change of direction forced opposing players to constantly recalculate, disrupting the flow of their defensive structure. The chaos he generated became a conduit for team cohesion. The players who had struggled to find synchronization now instinctively moved into the spaces he created, reacting to his acceleration and anticipating his decisions. Every counterattack Marcus launched was not merely opportunistic. It was a lesson in timing and vision. He intercepted passes with uncanny anticipation, transformed defensive recoveries into lethal forward thrusts, and orchestrated plays that seemed simultaneously spontaneous and premeditated. Each movement demoralized the opposition further, leaving them drained and reactive, rather than proactive. Marcus's control over the pitch extended beyond technical skill. He imposed his will on the flow of the game, reshaping the battlefield with every step. By halftime, Marcus had already tallied 2 assists and a goal. The scoreboard read 3-0, a statistic that told only part of the story. For those paying attention to the numbers alone, it seemed like a commanding lead. But the true impact of Marcus's performance was far deeper. He had reshaped the psyche of his team. His presence instilled a quiet confidence in his teammates, forcing them to trust one another and to move as extensions of his vision. He had made the entire stadium aware of his dominance, not through showy celebrations or arrogant gestures, but through sheer, unassailable mastery of the game. Every spectator, every commentator, every player on the field had felt the gravity of his presence, and no one could deny that Marcus Diop had transformed a struggling team into a coordinated, fearsome unit under the pressure of the World Cup stage. In the locker room, the transformation was palpable. Teammates who had once dismissed him approached with hesitant respect. Bauer, sidelined and still bitter, could not hide a flicker of envy in his eyes. Marcus did not speak. His performance had already conveyed what words never could. The quarterfinal match was held in a stadium built for legends. The stands packed, flags fluttering, the roar of tens of thousands echoing like a tidal wave. Opponents were aware now. Marcus Diop was no longer a secret. They came prepared, defenders shadowing him, double-teaming, anticipating his explosive movements. Yet Marcus adapted instantly. Every sprint, every dribble, every feint was a negotiation with physics, strategy, and instinct. He read their intentions before they acted, exploiting overcommitments with elegance and precision. By the 18th minute, Marcus had already outpaced 3 defenders on a solo break. A sliding tackle came like a sledgehammer, but he vaulted over it, ball still glued to his boot, continuing toward the goal. He took the shot, off balance, powerful and precise, and the keeper could only watch as the ball struck the post and rolled in off a rebound. Goal number 2 for Marcus. Teammates rushed to celebrate, but his eyes were fixed on the field, already calculating the next move, already seeing the gaps the next attack would create. The stadium's atmosphere was electric. Every play Marcus initiated drew collective gasps. Every feint drew waves of applause. Every sprint caused the crowd to lean forward, captivated. Commentators shouted over the noise, "He is rewriting the script of football, an unstoppable force." Marcus Diop, one man, one hurricane, controlling the pitch. In the semifinal, the stakes rose exponentially. Opponents were faster, more tactical, more physical. Marcus's team was exhausted from the relentless pace of the previous rounds. Yet when the whistle blew, Marcus transformed pressure into opportunity. Each touch of the ball, each acceleration, each perfectly weighted pass became a command. Teammates moved like extensions of his body, responding instinctively to his feints, step-overs, and sudden directional changes. A critical moment arrived in the 60th minute. The opposition's captain lunged for a tackle, his studs aimed with intent to stop Marcus in his tracks. Marcus anticipated, shifted weight mid-air, and pirouetted past him. Another defender lunged. He used a deceptive step-over and spun through, leaving the man sprawling on the turf. The stadium erupted again, thousands standing, thousands screaming, commentators barely able to articulate the spectacle. By the 70th minute, Marcus had scored again, set up another goal, and orchestrated an assist that tore through the defense like a scalpel. Each action forced the opposition into mistakes. Each movement dictated the tempo. Each sprint created space. He was no longer just a player. He was the heartbeat of the team, the eye of a storm that grew with every passing minute. The final in MetLife Stadium returned him to the place where it had all begun. The reigning world champions awaited, formidable, disciplined, and physically imposing. The stadium was packed, the VIP boxes filled with luminaries, politicians, and media magnates. Bauer sat in a cast, his expensive suit tight, his eyes fixed on Marcus with jealousy and disbelief. From kickoff, Marcus dominated. Every touch, every sprint, every tactical decision was calculated. He intercepted passes, launched solo runs, outmaneuvered defenders, and orchestrated his team's movement with surgical precision. Each goal attempt, each cross, feint was met with awe and disbelief. Commentators shouted superlatives. Fans cheered. The stadium trembled with collective anticipation. The match extended into extra time. Marcus's ankle throbbed from tactical fouls and relentless contact, but he refused to yield. Each step was a statement of will, each sprint an assertion of dominance. He tracked back to defend, contested aerial duels, launched counterattacks, and orchestrated scoring opportunities with finesse and power. The opposition began to falter, confused and exhausted by his presence. When the game reached the penalty shootout, the score tied at 4-4, the entire stadium and billions watching worldwide held their breath. Marcus stepped to the 11-meter spot. He inhaled deeply, letting go of every insult, every slight, every injustice. All that had happened from his childhood through the group stage now transformed into focus and precision. He struck the ball with ruthless accuracy into the bottom left corner. The keeper dived, powerless. The net rippled. Goal. Victory. The stadium erupted. Teammates mobbed Marcus, lifting him, carrying him into the sky as fireworks exploded overhead. Lefebvre cried openly, attempting to embrace him, but Marcus walked past, calm and resolute. Bauer, sidelined and humiliated, could do nothing but watch as Marcus lifted the golden ball and the World Cup trophy. Marcus's triumph was absolute. The world for once could not deny him. The roar of MetLife Stadium had barely faded, but the echoes of Marcus Diop's triumph reverberated far beyond the stands, far beyond the glare of cameras and the flash of reporters' lenses. As he lifted the golden ball and the World Cup trophy high into the New York night sky, fireworks exploded in a symphony of gold, red, and white, illuminating faces that had once doubted, insulted, and ignored him. Thomas Bauer, the Golden Prince who had strutted arrogantly through locker rooms, dining halls, and social media, now sat in silent disbelief, his leg encased in a cast, the expensive suit he had worn only emphasizing the futility of wealth and privilege against true talent. Every lens in the stadium captured Marcus, and not a single camera lingered on Bauer. The man who had mocked him labeled him a hired sprinter, a wild African, and a liability on the pitch, was now relegated to the periphery of glory. The stadium, the world, and the media had witnessed a reversal that was absolute, poetic, and inescapable. Newspapers that had previously smeared Marcus, with headlines questioning his discipline and intelligence, were now forced to publish images of him holding the World Cup aloft. Their words shifted from condescension to awe. Marcus Diop, the Hurricane of 2026. A masterclass in skill, determination, and brilliance. The man who redefined the game. Trolls who had once littered his social media with banana emojis and racist slurs were reduced to silent witnesses, unable to argue against the brilliance they had once tried to denigrate. Marcus did not gloat. He did not mock Bauer. His satisfaction lay in the undeniable reality that had been forced upon everyone who had doubted him. The wind had no color, and when the black hurricane rose, it swept away every prejudice, every petty doubt, every whispered insult into the ether. It was justice without cruelty, vindication without malice. A reckoning served cold but precise. Back in the locker room, teammates crowded around Marcus, patting his back, embracing him, their admiration genuine and belated. Some had feared his wrath. Others had feared his talent. But Marcus did not need to punish. He had already proven his worth where it mattered most. On the pitch, in front of the world, under pressure, no one else could endure. Those who had marginalized him now had no choice but to recognize his supremacy. Bauer stood apart, clutching crutches, tempting to approach the podium for the medal ceremony. But the cameras bypassed him, focusing on Marcus exclusively. Every broadcast, every network, every streaming feed immortalized Marcus as the hero. The Golden Prince, once lauded as the architect of every victory, now hovered at the edge of significance, his reputation dwarfed by the man he had once scorned. Outside the stadium, reporters lined the streets, live coverage capturing Marcus in every moment, walking calmly, dignified, almost serene. Fans shouted his name in multiple languages, holding jerseys, waving banners, and chanting in unison, "Marcus! Marcus! Marcus!" The celebration was global, an undeniable testament to resilience, to skill, and to the quiet power of endurance. In the luxury suites, political figures and media moguls who had once sided with Bauer now looked on in awe, their own hubris shattered. They had tried to align with the visible, the golden-haired prince, ignoring raw talent, ignoring grit, ignoring the fire in a young man's soul. Marcus's victory was a mirror held to their arrogance. Those who see only what they expect to see, those who believe power and privilege are permanent, would be reminded that brilliance can emerge from anywhere, and it often appears where it is least anticipated. Marcus walked to the podium, the golden ball in one hand, the World Cup trophy in the other. He lifted them high. Fireworks flared behind him. The cameras captured every angle, every detail, every moment of glory. The world had to witness it. No one could edit it away. No commentator could rewrite history. He had earned everything with skill, sweat, and an unbreakable will. Every mocker, every hater, every skeptic had to look up and acknowledge it. The moral was clear, impossible to ignore. Those who had judged him superficially, the color of his skin, his origins, his place in a rigid hierarchy, had been proven profoundly wrong. Marcus did not lower himself to gloat or retaliate. The very act of being celebrated, immortalized, and unchallengeably victorious was the ultimate answer. Every glance of envy, every grimace of shame, every whispered acknowledgement from those who had scorned him was absorbed silently, a quiet satisfaction that did not need words. Even as the confetti fell, Marcus's eyes scanned the horizon. He imagined every young player watching, every overlooked talent, every underdog relegated to shadows. His triumph was not just personal, it was universal. It was proof that determination, skill, and perseverance could break through walls of prejudice, that the world could be forced to recognize the truth when brilliance refuses to be ignored. In the press conferences that followed, reporters asked questions about the tactics, the goals, the plays. Marcus answered with measured clarity, never bragging, never demeaning. his silence toward those who had doubted him was louder than any words could have been. The story of the hurricane, the storm that had blown across Azteca and MetLife, would be told in newspapers, on screens, in bars and living rooms around the globe. And everywhere it carried the same undeniable lesson. Those who underestimate others do so at their peril. That night, Chief, Marcus looked across the city from the balcony of his hotel. The skyline glittered with the remnants of fireworks, the river reflected the light in fractured waves, and the cool wind carried the faint murmur of fans still celebrating. He did not feel the need for revenge. The world had already delivered justice. Those who had scorned him, ignored him, or mocked him had been rendered spectators of his ascendancy. Theirs was the silent lesson. Arrogance is temporary, talent is enduring, and the one you try to diminish can rise higher than you ever imagined. Marcus whispered to himself, a quiet vow carried by the wind. I did not need to fight them in words. I let my actions speak. Let them remember this. Never look down on another. Never assume greatness will conform to your expectations. When you underestimate someone, the world will remind you in ways you cannot ignore. And, as he placed the trophies on display, watched the celebrations ripple across the pitch, and saw the cameras ignore Bauer entirely, he smiled. It was a calm, victorious smile. The smile of someone who had endured every slight, every insult, and had emerged as an unstoppable force, leaving those who had doubted him with only a single, humbling truth. The hurricane had arrived, and it could not be contained. The golden light of the stadium illuminated Marcus Diop, the man who had transformed humiliation into triumph, marginalization into global recognition. The world had witnessed it. Those who once sneered, whispered, and dismissed him had no choice but to bow to reality. In the end, brilliance cannot be ignored, talent cannot be hidden, and fire forged in adversity always leaves a mark. And the storm? It was only beginning.